Papa, if the bad man wins, will you remember me? Will you remember I was happy here even if it was just for a little while? The 3-year-old girl looked up at the only father she'd ever known. 2 weeks, that's all they had left before the court could tear their family apart. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the day nobody wanted her. The little girl cried those words, standing alone on a wooden platform under the merciless Montana sun. 3 years old, barefoot, bleeding feet pressed against rough planks that burned in the summer heat of 1882. Her dress hung in rags, more holes than fabric, exposing the sharp angles of ribs beneath skin stretched too tight over bones. Enormous brown eyes stared at nothing and everything at once. No tears fell. She had learned long ago that crying only made the beatings worse. The auctioneer's voice cracked with frustration, with exhaustion, with something approaching desperation. Last chance, anybody? She eats almost nothing. $3, $2. Surely someone needs a pair of small hands around the house. The crowd shifted. Women fanned themselves with handkerchiefs damp with sweat. Men mopped their faces with bandanas that came away soaked. Children darted between the legs of adults, bored with the proceedings, eager to return to games abandoned for this spectacle. The summer heat pressed down on Silver Creek like a punishment from God himself. Heat waves distorted the air above the platform where the girl stood frozen, clutching a torn teddy bear to her chest with both hands. The bear was falling apart. Stuffing poked through a dozen tears. One eye hung by a thread. The fur was matted with dirt and what might have been blood. But the girl held it like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. Perhaps it was. Too small, someone muttered from the crowd. Too much trouble. A farmer near the front shook his head, his weathered face set in stubborn lines. Won't be no use for years. Be eating more than she's worth. I ain't running to charity. Another man younger but with eyes just as hard called out. What good's a runt like that? Probably simple-minded. Look at her just standing there. A woman near the edge of the gathering tutted to her husband, her voice carrying despite her attempt at discretion. Poor little thing. But we've already got 4 mouths to feed. Can't take on another. Lord knows we can't. Someone behind muttered just loud enough to be heard. Damaged goods. You can see it in her eyes. Something's broken in that one. Probably been beaten too much already. The auctioneer mopped his forehead with a handkerchief that had long since stopped absorbing moisture. His suit was sweat-stained, his voice hoarse from hours of calling out bids, making promises, selling children to the highest bidder. This was the last one. The last child from the orphan train that had arrived yesterday. All the others had been claimed. Healthy boys for farm work, pretty girls for household help, babies for couples who wanted to start fresh with something untainted. Didn't. But this one, this small, damaged, silent thing. Nobody wanted her. The auctioneer tried one last time, his voice taking on a desperate edge. All right, folks, if nobody wants her, she goes back to the orphanage in Helena. They'll find some use for her, I reckon. Everyone in the crowd knew what that meant. Helena was not an orphanage in any true sense of the word. It was a workhouse, a place where children went in, and if they came out at all, they came out broken in ways that could never be mended. The lucky ones died young. The girl on the platform shifted her weight, and those close enough could see her wince. Her feet were worse than most had realized. Not just dirty, not just bare, but cut and bruised and bleeding from standing on the rough wood. From walking miles in those bare feet to get to this moment, to this rejection. Still, she did not cry. That absence of tears was perhaps the most heartbreaking thing of all. This child at 3 years old had learned that the world offered nothing but hurt, had learned to endure pain in silence, had learned not to ask, not to hope, not to want. Going once, the auctioneer called his voice heavy with the knowledge of what would come next. Going twice. Wait. The word cut through the heavy afternoon air like a knife through flesh. One word. But it changed everything. Every head in the crowd swiveled toward the source. A tall figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the gathering. His boots struck wood with authority as he strode toward the platform. The crowd parted before him without thinking, without planning, simply making way for a man who carried himself like he owned the ground beneath his feet. Caleb Brennan. Everyone recognized him. How could they not? He owned the biggest horse ranch in Montana territory. Kept to himself these past 4 years. Hardly came to town except for supplies. Spoke to no one unless necessary. A ghost walking among the living, some said. A man who had buried his heart with his wife. What was he doing here? The auctioneer blinked, momentarily struck dumb. Mr. Brennan, did you say something? Cale's boots hit the platform with heavy thuds. His long stride ate up the distance between himself and the child. She flinched at his approach, pressing the teddy bear tighter against her chest, but she did not run. Perhaps she knew she had nowhere to run to. How much? His voice came out rougher than he intended. 4 years of disuse had not made him gentle. The auctioneer stammered. Mr. Brennan, sir, this is highly irregular. A man in your position, taking in a child, a girl child, without a wife, the Reverend, the town. People will talk. I asked how much. The words fell like stones into still water. Flat, final, brooking no argument. The standard placement fee is $5, but... Cale pulled out his wallet. His hands moved with the economy of motion that came from a lifetime of ranch work. Counted out $50, 10 times the asking price. Slapped the bills on the podium with enough force that several fluttered in the hot breeze. That should cover the fee, and then some. Papers, now. The crowd erupted in whispers, a hive of voices buzzing with shock and speculation and judgment. Brennan's lost his mind. What's a bachelor rancher want with a little girl ain't natural? A man his age living alone, taking in a child like that. Reverend Whitmore ain't going to like this. Cale ignored them all. Every last voice, every judgment, every assumption. He crouched down slowly, carefully bringing himself to eye level with the girl. Up close, she was even more pitiful than he had realized from the crowd. Cheeks hollow. Arms like twigs that might snap in a strong wind. Dark circles under those enormous eyes that seemed to take up half her face. Hey there, he said quietly, keeping his voice as soft as he knew how. What's your name? She stared at him without answering. Her grip on the teddy bear tightened until her knuckles went white. That's your friend? He nodded toward the bear. He got a name. Still nothing. But something flickered in her eyes. Not trust. Not yet. But curiosity. Maybe. A tiny spark of something that was not quite fear. I'm Cale. I've got a ranch about 10 miles from here. Lots of horses. You ever seen a horse up close? The smallest shake of her head. So slight he might have imagined it. They're real gentle, most of them. Soft noses, like to be petted. Softer than this little fella even. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements, giving her plenty of time to pull away. Touched the teddy bear's worn head with one finger. Just one finger. Gentle as he could manage. The girl looked down at his hand on her bear, then back up at his face. Searching, evaluating with an intelligence that seemed far too old for such a small body. God, she was smart. He could see it in those eyes. A sharp awareness that had learned to assess threats, to read danger, to survive. Mr. Brennan, the auctioneer thrust papers into his field of vision, desperate to complete this transaction before the man changed his mind. If you'll just sign here. In a minute, I'm talking to her. She don't talk much. The auctioneer's nervous energy manifested in words he could not quite stop. Hasn't said more than a word or two since she arrived. The orphanage matron said she's simple-minded, but I think she's just, I didn't ask for your opinion. The words came out like a whip crack. The auctioneer retreated hastily, clutching his papers, his face flushed. Cale turned back to the girl, kept his voice gentle despite the anger burning in his chest. I'm going to pick you up now. All right, going to take you somewhere safe. Somewhere with food and a real bed and nobody who will hurt you. She studied him for a long moment. Those brown eyes searched his face for the lie, for the deception that always came, for the promise that would be broken. When she did not find it, or perhaps when she decided she had no other choice, she nodded. So slightly he almost missed it. Cale scooped her up with a gentleness that surprised even himself. She weighed almost nothing. A bundle of bones and fear wrapped in rags. Her small body went rigid in his arms, every muscle tensed, waiting for the pain that always followed being touched. It's okay, he murmured against her matted hair. You're okay now. He signed the papers one-handed while the auctioneer babbled about procedures and proper channels and things that Cale did not care about. The crowd parted before him as he walked through their midst. Whispers followed like gnats. Scandal. Poor child. What's he thinking Reverend Whitmore ain't gonna like this? Cale's jaw tightened at that last one. Whitmore, the sanctimonious bastard who ran the local orphanage, who preached charity from his pulpit every Sunday while children starved in his care, who lined his pockets with money meant for the vulnerable. If Cale had any sense, he would have punched the man years ago. Jake Cooper was waiting by the wagon, his weathered face split between shock and something approaching awe. Cale, what in the— Not now. Cale settled the girl on the wagon seat with care, mindful of her injured feet, gathered the reins in one hand. We're going home. You just bought a child. I know what I did. You coming or staying? Jake scrambled up onto his own horse, sputtering questions that Cale ignored with the practice of a man who had spent 4 years perfecting the art of silence. The girl sat perfectly still as the wagon rattled out of town, her bear pressed against her chest, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape. She had not made a sound since Kelly picked her up. Not a word, not a whimper, not even a breath loud enough to hear over the creak of wheels and the clip of hooves. Once they cleared the town limits, once the buildings fell away and gave way to grasslands stretching gold and green toward distant mountains, Cale let himself breathe. What's your bear's name? He asked again, softer now that they were alone. Silence stretched between them like a living thing. The wagon rolled on. The sun beat down. The world turned beneath them, indifferent to the small drama playing out on this dusty road. Then so quiet he almost missed it. Biscuit. Her voice was raspy from disuse, barely more than a whisper, but she had spoken. This child who had been silent through her own auction had chosen to speak. Cale's heart clenched in his chest. Biscuit. That's a good name, strong name. She looked up at him then. Really looked. Those brown eyes searched his face for something. Deception, maybe. The lie that always came before the pain. The false kindness that preceded cruelty. He's my friend, she whispered. I can see that. Cale kept his eyes on the road, giving her space, giving her the dignity of not being watched too closely. You've been together long, Mama gave him. A pause so long he thought she might not continue. For she went to sleep. Went to sleep. Cale understood. Kids that age did not have words for death, just gentle euphemisms that adults taught them to make the unbearable somehow bearable. I'm sorry about your mom. The girl did not respond, just tucked Biscuit under her chin and watched the landscape roll by. Mountains in the distance. Sky so blue it hurt to look at. Grass rippling in waves like an ocean made of gold. They rode in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. The kind of quiet that came from two souls who had learned that sometimes words were not enough. The ranch came into view as they crested a hill. The main house sprawled solid and sturdy against the horizon. Barns and corrals spread out like a small village. Pastures dotted with horses that looked like scattered jewels from this distance. Cale had built this place with his own 2 hands, with money earned through sweat and blood and years of labor that left his back aching and his hands calloused. That's home, he said, pointing. The girl's eyes went wide. Big, she breathed. Yeah, too big for just me, honestly. Gets real quiet. She absorbed this information, her small brow furrowing in thought. You live alone for now. Got some folks who help with the horses. But in the house at night, yeah. Just me, lonely. The question hit him somewhere deep. Somewhere he had thought sealed off. 3 years old and she understood loneliness better than most adults ever would. Sometimes he admitted, she considered this. Then so quietly he was not sure he heard right. Me too. The wagon pulled up to the main house. Before Cale could climb down, before he could help the girl, the front door burst open. A woman in her late 50s stormed down the porch steps, gray hair escaping from her bun, flour on her apron, eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and something that might have been fury or might have been fear. Caleb Brennan. Her voice could have cut glass. Jake's boy rode ahead and told me. What in heaven's name have you done? Sarah Morgan had been running the Brennan household for 20 years. First for Cale's father, now for Cale. She had nursed him through childhood fevers, boxed his ears for misbehavior, held him while he sobbed after his wife died. After his son followed 3 days later, she was the closest thing he had to a mother, the only person in the world who could speak to him like this. Sarah, I need your help. He lifted the girl down from the wagon seat, keeping his movements slow and gentle. Sarah stood frozen on the bottom step. Her sharp eyes took in the tiny child in Kale's arms. The rags, the bleeding feet, the hollow cheeks, the haunted expression and eyes too old for such a young face. Lord have mercy. The anger drained from Sarah's voice like water through a sieve. What have they done to this baby? Nothing good. Kale shifted the girl in his arms. She needs food, a bath, clean clothes, someone to look at those feet. Sarah's face transformed. Shock became fierce determination in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Bring her inside, now. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Sarah heated water for a bath while Kale sat with the girl in the kitchen, coaxing her to eat small bites of bread and cheese. She ate like she expected the food to be taken away at any moment. Fast, barely chewing, her eyes darting to the door, watching for threats that might burst through. Slow down, little one. Kale touched her arm gently. Nobody's going to take it from you. There's plenty more where that came from. She froze, a piece of cheese halfway to her mouth, stared at him with naked disbelief. I promise. Eat all you want. If you're still hungry after Sarah will make you more. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of hope, a tiny crack in the armor she had built around herself to survive. The bath's ready, Sarah called from upstairs. The girl's whole body went rigid. Her eyes darted toward the door, the windows, any possible escape route. Hey, Kale crouched down to her level. It's just a bath, warm water, maybe some soap that smells nice. Sarah will be gentle. I promise. No. The word came out sharp, terrified. No bath, please. Kale's gut twisted. What had they done to this child that made her fear simple things like water? Okay, no bath tonight. Maybe tomorrow when you're ready. How's that sound? She stared at him, clearly waiting for the catch, the punishment, the anger that always followed defiance. When none came, when he just looked at her with patient eyes, she nodded slowly. Good. Kale offered her his hand. Let's go find you a room then, somewhere you can sleep. She did not take his hand, but she followed him, a small shadow trailing behind. Her bear clutched tight. Sarah met them in the hallway, her expression carefully neutral, despite the questions burning in her eyes. I've got the blue room ready. It's small, but it's got a nice window. Perfect, Kale led the way. The girl's bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floors. She moved like a ghost, like something trying desperately not to be noticed. The room was simple, a bed with a patchwork quilt that Sarah had made years ago, a small dresser, a window that looked out over the east pasture where horses grazed in the golden evening light. Clean, safe, more space than this child had probably ever called her own. She stood in the doorway, not entering. This is yours. Kale gestured to the room. All of it, nobody else's. She looked at him, at Sarah, at the room. Her bottom lip trembled. Mine, yours. She walked in slowly, touching the quilt with one tentative finger as if it might bite. Then the dresser, then the window, pressing her palm flat against the glass like she needed to confirm it was real. That this was not some dream she would wake from to find herself back in the dark. Biscuit, too. She held up the bear. Biscuit, too. Something in her face crumpled. Not sadness exactly, but the release of tension held too long. Walls starting to crack under the weight of hope she had not dared to feel. She sat down on the bed very carefully, as if expecting it to disappear, as if one wrong move might shatter this fragile moment. Then she looked up at Kale with those enormous eyes. What's your name again, Kale? Caleb really, but everyone calls me Kale. Kale, she repeated, testing it. You won't. You won't make me go back. The question broke something in him. Some last wall he had been holding up against the world. No, he crouched down, meeting her eyes directly. I won't make you go back. This is your home now. Understand? She studied him for a long moment, searching for the lies she had learned to expect from adults. When she did not find it, when all she saw was a broken man trying his best to offer safety, he barely believed in himself. She nodded slowly. Okay, one word. But it was enough. Sarah appeared with a glass of milk and a clean nightgown, 3 sizes too big. Let's get you changed, little one. That dress needs burning. The girl flinched at the approach but allowed Sarah to help her change. Her tiny body revealed the truth of her suffering. Ribs visible beneath paper-thin skin, bruises in various stages of healing, yellow and green and purple marks that told a story of systematic violence. And on her back, Sarah made a sound like she had been punched. Cale saw the scars, old ones faded to silver, newer ones still pink and raw, whip marks on a 3-year-old child, evidence of beatings too numerous to count, of pain inflicted by adults who should have protected her. He turned away, walked out of the room before he said something that would frighten the child, walked all the way downstairs, out the back door, stood in the yard with his hands shaking, fury burning through his veins like wildfire. Someone had beaten this baby, repeatedly, systematically, and Caleb Brennan was going to find out who. Sarah found him an hour later, still standing in the yard, still staring at nothing. She's asleep. Took her a while. Wouldn't close her eyes until I promised to leave the lamp burning. Cale did not respond, could not trust his voice, the scars on her back. Sarah's voice was tight with controlled rage. I know I'm going to kill someone. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. Not tonight, you're not. Sarah put her hand on his arm. Tonight, you're going to sit with me and figure out how to help that child. Because she needs help, Cale. More than just a bed and food. What do you mean? She didn't just learn not to cry. Sarah's words came slow. Careful, she learned not to exist. To take up as little space as possible. To never ask for anything. Never want anything. Never expect anything. That kind of learning doesn't just go away. Cale thought about the way the girl had moved through the house. Silent, careful, always watching. The way she had flinched at every sudden sound. The way she had eaten like someone might steal the food from her hands. So what do? We give her time. Sarah squeezed his arm. We show her over and over that this is different. That we won't hurt her. That she's allowed to want things. To need things. To be a child. She paused. And we find out her name. She hasn't told us that yet. Cale nodded slowly. I'll talk to the auctioneer tomorrow. Find out where she came from. Who had her before? Sarah's expression hardened. And the town is going to talk. Let them. Reverend Whitmore won't be pleased. A single man taking in a little girl. Reverend Whitmore can go to hell. Sarah smiled grimly. I was hoping you'd say that. She turned toward the house, then paused. Cale, what you did today. Anna would have been proud. He could not speak past the lump in his throat. Just nodded. Later that night, Cale sat in the chair outside the girl's room, listening to her breathe. She whimpered in her sleep a few times. Soft sounds of distress that made his hands clench. He heard Sarah go in to soothe her, heard the low murmur of comforting words. Around midnight, a soft voice drifted through the door. Cale, he was inside before he had made a conscious decision to move. The girl sat up in bed, her bear clutched to her chest. Moonlight streaming through the window painted silver tracks down her cheeks. Tears, finally. After everything she was crying. Hey. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, keeping distance between them. Bad dream? She nodded, her breath hitching. Want to tell me about it, the dark room? Her voice was barely audible. They put me in the dark room when I was bad. Cale's hands clenched into fists, hidden at his sides where she could not see. There's no dark room here. No punishment rooms. No bad places. You understand? She looked up at him, those enormous eyes glistening in the moonlight. Promise, I promise. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you ever again. She studied his face in the moonlight, searching for truth. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because her body relaxed slightly, the rigid tension easing just a fraction. Emma, she whispered. What my name? Her grip tightened on Biscuit. I'm Emma. Something warm bloomed in Cale's chest. Something he had not felt in 4 years. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Emma. That's a beautiful name. She almost smiled. Almost. Go back to sleep, Emma. I'll be right outside if you need me. You won't leave, I won't leave. She lay back down, pulling the quilt up to her chin, her bear tucked securely beside her. Her eyes stayed fixed on Cale until sleep finally claimed her again. Until her breathing evened out and her small body relaxed into true rest. Cale sat in that chair until dawn broke over the mountains. watching over a child who had somehow impossibly cracked through walls he had spent 4 years building. And for the first time since Anna died, Caleb Brennan felt something other than empty. He felt afraid. Afraid of how much this tiny girl already meant to him. Afraid of what he would do if anyone tried to take her away. Afraid of the future stretching out before them. Uncertain. Terrifying. Full of more hope than he had allowed himself to feel in years. But more than fear, he felt determined. Emma had spent her whole short life being unwanted, being hurt, being told she was not worth the trouble. That ended today. From this moment forward, she would know every single day that someone had chosen her, that someone had looked at her standing alone on that platform and decided she was worth everything. Cale did not know how to be a father, did not know the first thing about raising a little girl, but he knew how to protect what was his. And Emma was his now. God help anyone who tried to change that. The first week tested Cale in ways he never expected. Emma did not speak much. She followed him around the ranch like a silent shadow, always 3 steps behind, always watching. When he turned too quickly, she flinched. When he raised his voice to call Jake across the yard, she disappeared behind the nearest door. Sarah had warned him, patience, time. But watching a 3-year-old child live in constant fear nearly broke him. She ain't eaten enough. Sarah cornered him in the kitchen on the third morning, takes a few bites, then stops like she's waiting for permission. Give her permission then. I have. Doesn't help. She's been taught that food is earned, Cale, that she don't deserve it unless she works for it. Cale's jaw tightened. She's 3 years old. I know. He found Emma in the barn later that morning, standing frozen in front of a stall. Inside, a mare named Honey nuzzled her newborn foal. The baby was all long legs and soft eyes. Honey was protective but gentle. A good mother. That's Honey, Cale said softly, coming to stand beside Emma. Had her baby 2 days ago. Little filly. Emma did not respond, but her eyes were fixed on the foal with something that looked like wonder. You want to touch her, the tiniest nod. Cale opened the stall door, spoke quietly to Honey. The mare knew him, trusted him, allowed him to lift Emma up, to hold her close to the foal. The baby horse sniffed at Emma's outstretched hand, soft nose bumping against tiny fingers, warm breath against palm. Soft. The word came out barely audible. Real soft. Yeah. Cale's voice caught on something that felt dangerously like tears. Emma turned to look at him. And for the first time, something other than fear flickered in her eyes. What's her name? Don't have one yet. Maybe you could help me think of one. Emma considered this seriously, her small face scrunched up in concentration. Buttercup, Buttercup, Cale nodded. I like it. Buttercup it is. That night, Emma ate half her dinner without being coaxed. A small victory. But Cale held on to it like treasure. The nightmares came every night without fail. Cale learned to sleep light, listening for the whimpers that meant Emma was trapped in darkness again. Sometimes Sarah got there first. Sometimes Cale did. On the fourth night, he found her not in bed but huddled in the corner of her room. Biscuit pressed against her face. Emma. He crouched down slowly. What happened? The thunder. Her voice shook. It sounds like him. Like who, the man with the belt? Cale's blood ran cold. What man, sweetheart? But she would not say more, just pressed herself further into the corner, making her body as small as possible, disappearing. Cale sat down on the floor beside her, not touching, just present. The thunder can't hurt you, it's just noise. Big, loud noise, but that's all it is. He said that too. Emma's whisper was barely audible. Before he hurt me. Something inside Cale shattered. I'm not him. He kept his voice steady with effort. I will never hurt you, Emma. Never. You understand? She looked up at him, those enormous eyes searching his face in the darkness. How do I know? The question pierced him. How could he prove something that had to be shown over time? How could he make a broken child believe in safety she had never experienced? You don't. Not yet. But I'm going to show you every single day, and maybe one day you'll believe me. The thunder cracked again. Emma flinched but did not hide her face. Can you? Can you stay? I'll stay as long as you need. He stayed until dawn, his back against the wall, while Emma eventually drifted off with her head against his arm. Sarah found them there in the morning and had to turn away to hide her tears. On the 7th day, Tommy Morgan arrived, Sarah's 10-year-old grandson, visiting for the summer. He burst through the front door like a small tornado, all energy and noise. Emma vanished. Where'd she go? Tommy looked around confused. Grandma said there was a little girl. You scared her. Cale headed for the stairs. Stay here. He found Emma under her bed, pressed against the wall, trembling. Hey. He lay down on his stomach so he could see her. It's okay, that's just Tommy. He's loud, but he's harmless. He yelled. He's excited. Boys his age are like that. Cale held out his hand. Come on out. I'll introduce you properly. She did not move. Emma, his voice gentled. Nobody in this house will hurt you. Not me, not Sarah, not Tommy, I promise. Slowly, painfully. She crawled out from under the bed. Her whole body was shaking. Cale scooped her up, and for the first time she did not go rigid in his arms. She leaned into him instead, her face pressed against his neck. Progress. The introduction went better than expected. Tommy, under strict instructions from Sarah, approached Emma like she was a skittish horse. Hi, he crouched down to her level. I'm Tommy. I'm 10. What's your name? Emma pressed closer to Cale's leg but answered. Emma, that's a nice name. Tommy grinned. You ever seen baby horses before? A tiny nod. Cool. You want to come see Buttercup with me? She's getting bigger every day. Emma looked up at Cale, seeking permission. Go ahead. I'll be right here if you need me. She hesitated, then took Tommy's offered hand. He led her toward the barn, chattering about horses and summer and everything a 10-year-old found interesting. Sarah appeared beside Cale. Watching them go, that boy's got a gift with wounded creatures. Let's hope it works on this one. By the end of the day, Tommy had coaxed Emma's first laugh out of her. A small rusty sound, like something that had not been used in too long. Cale heard it from across the yard and had to sit down. You all right, boss? Jake materialized beside him. Fine. Cale cleared his throat. Just fine. Jake followed his gaze to where Tommy was showing Emma how to make a horse out of hay and twine. She's coming around, slowly. That's how it works with the broken ones. Jake sat down on the fence rail. Knew a horse once. Beaten so bad he wouldn't let nobody near him. Took 2 years before he'd trust a human again. But when he did, Jake shook his head. Most loyal animal I've ever worked with. She's not a horse, Jake. No, but hurt's hurt, and healing takes what it takes. On the morning of the 8th day, trouble came riding in. Cale was in the barn with Emma, showing her how to brush Buttercup with the careful attention she gave everything she loved. Jake came running, rider coming in fast. Looks official. Cale's stomach dropped. Take Emma to Sarah now, but the horsey Emma started. I know, sweetheart. We'll come back, but right now I need you to go with Jake. Okay. Something in his voice scared her. She nodded quickly and let Jake lead her away. Cale walked out to meet the rider, a young man in a deputy's uniform, sweating and uncomfortable. Mr. Brennan, got papers for you from Reverend Whitmore. Cale took the envelope, broke the seal. His vision went red. What is it, boss? Jake returned, standing at a careful distance. It's a summons, Cale's voice came out like gravel. Whitmore is challenging the adoption. Says I obtained Emma through improper channels. He wants her returned to the orphanage pending review. He can't do that. You paid. You signed papers. Apparently those papers weren't valid. The auctioneer didn't have authority to place children. That's Whitmore's job. That's horseshit. The auction happens every year. And every year Whitmore looks the other way because he gets a cut. Cale was already striding toward the house. But I took something he had already promised to someone else. Margaret Price. Margaret Price. Sarah met them at the door, Emma hiding behind her skirts. What's happened? Cale could not answer, could not look at Emma and tell her that the safety he had promised might be ripped away. Sarah took one look at his face and understood. Emma, honey, go play with Tommy in the kitchen. There's cookies, but now, sweetheart? Emma went, but not before casting one terrified glance at Cale. When she was gone, Cale handed Sarah the crumpled summons. She read it and her face went white. When 2 weeks, there's a hearing at the courthouse. Can we fight it? I don't know. Cale's voice was hollow. I need a lawyer, someone who isn't in Whitmore's pocket. There's William Hart Jake offered. New in town, young idealistic, hasn't been corrupted yet. Get him. Today. Jake nodded and was gone. Sarah caught Cale's arm. You can't let her see you like this. she'll know something's wrong. Something is wrong, but she don't need to feel it. Not yet. Sarah's grip tightened. You go in there, you put a smile on your face, and you tell that little girl everything's fine. You hear me? Cale took a deep breath. Then another. When he finally walked into the kitchen, his face was calm. Hey, sweetheart. He crouched down beside Emma's chair. Having a good cookie? She nodded, but her eyes were worried. You look scared. Outside. God, this child missed nothing. Grown-up stuff, Cale said lightly. Nothing for you to worry about. Is someone going to take me away? The question hit him like a punch. Number, he took her small hand in his. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Promise. He should have hesitated, should have been honest about the uncertainty. But looking into those trusting brown eyes, Cale could not do it. I promise. Emma searched his face for a long moment. Then she nodded and went back to her cookie. But when Cale stood up, Sarah was watching him with knowing eyes. They both understood the weight of what he had just sworn, and they both knew that keeping that promise might cost him everything. William Hart arrived that afternoon, a young man with wire-rimmed spectacles and an earnest face that made him look even younger than his 25 years. He dismounted his horse with the careful precision of someone who had learned to ride late in life. His suit was clean but worn at the elbows. His boots were scuffed, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent. And when he shook Cale's hand, his grip was firm. Mr. Brennan, I've heard about your situation. Then you know I need help. I know Whitmore thinks he can bully you into giving up that little girl. Will's jaw set in a way that suggested he had his own reasons for disliking the Reverend. I also know he's been running crooked 4 years. Nobody's had the guts to challenge him. Will you? That's why I came to Silver Creek. Will pulled papers from his satchel, spread them on Cale's desk with the careful organization of a man who understood the power of documentation. I've been building a case, gathering testimony from former orphans, tracking financial irregularities. Whitmore's dirty Mr. Brennan, he and Margaret Price both. Hope flickered in Cale's chest, small and fragile as a candle flame in wind. Can you prove it? Not yet. But if we can delay this hearing, buy some time. Will met his eyes. I think we can take them down and protect Emma in the process. Cale looked toward the house. Through the window, he could see Emma playing some game with Tommy that involved biscuit and a lot of giggling. She was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since he had brought her home. Whatever it takes, whatever it takes, even if it makes you enemies, even if this town turns against you, Cale's answer came without hesitation. She's worth it. Will nodded slowly. Something in his expression suggested he understood, that he too had known what it meant to fight for something worth saving. Then let's get to work. They spent the next 3 hours mapping strategy. Will laid out the legal landscape with brutal honesty. On paper, Whitmore had grounds. The auctioneer had overstepped his authority. The placement should have gone through official channels, channels that Whitmore controlled. But we shift the focus, Will explained. Make it about Emma's welfare, not procedural technicalities. We prove she's thriving with you, that returning her to Whitmore's care would be harmful. How medical examination? Document the scars, the malnutrition. Get a doctor to testify about the abuse she suffered while in Whitmore's system. Dr. Catherine Hayes. Will's face brightened. Perfect. She's one of the few doctors in the territory who'll testify against Whitmore. Most are too afraid of losing patients, of being ostracized. But Catherine, he shook his head with something like admiration. Catherine doesn't scare easy. The plan took shape, layers of defense, multiple angles of attack, medical evidence, character witnesses, financial records showing Whitmore's pattern of profiting from child placements. And if they could find more former orphans willing to testify about conditions in his care. It's going to be close, Mr. Brennan. Will gathered his papers. And Whitmore will fight dirty. Let him. But even as they planned, even as they built their case, brick by careful brick, Cale could not shake the feeling that they were always one step behind. That Whitmore had been playing this game longer, knew the rules better, had already made moves they had not yet discovered. That night after Emma was asleep, Cale sat with Sarah and Jake in the kitchen. The lamp burned low. Outside, crickets sang their evening chorus. I need to know everything about Margaret Price, Cale said grimly, and her connection to the Helena orphanage. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his weathered face troubled in the lamplight. There's been talk, nothing confirmed, but talk about what Widow Price lost most of her money when her husband died. Everyone knows she's barely keeping that big house running. Jake paused. Rumor is she's been acquiring help. Help. Sarah's voice was hard as stone. Children. From the orphanages. Calls them wards, but they're workers. Unpaid. Barely fed. She trailed off. The silence that followed was heavy with implications too dark to speak aloud. And when they're old enough to leave, Cale pressed. Sarah met his eyes. Nobody knows. That's the problem. Nobody knows where they go. Cale felt sick. The bread he had eaten at dinner sat like lead in his stomach. And Whitmore Reverend runs the local orphanage. Feeds into the one in Helena. Jake's voice was quiet. Word is he and Mrs. Price have an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? The kind where children who nobody wants end up wherever pays the most. Cale stood so fast his chair crashed backward. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen like a gunshot. And they put Emma on that platform. They would have. You stopped it. Sarah grabbed his arm. You stepped in before it could happen. But how many others didn't get that chance? Cale was pacing now. Fury and horror warring in his chest. How many children have they? You can't save them all, Cale. I can try. And lose Emma in the process. Sarah's voice cut through his rage like a blade. You go after Whitmore and Price, they'll come after you. They'll say you're unfit. They'll take her back. The words stopped Cale cold. They can't. They can try. And in this town where you've got no wife, no standing with the church, no allies except hired hands and an old woman. Sarah shook her head. You pick a fight now, you might lose everything. Cale's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to do something, to expose these monsters, to protect every child they had ever hurt. But Emma's face swam before his eyes. Emma, who was just starting to smile. Emma, who had finally stopped flinching at loud noises. Emma, who trusted him. What do I do? For now, you protect your girl. You build your case. You find allies. Sarah's voice softened. And you pray they don't move first. But prayer would not be enough. 3 days later, Reverend Silas Whitmore came to the ranch himself. Cale met him on the porch, deliberately blocking the door, making it clear the man would not be invited inside. Reverend. His voice could have frozen water. Mr. Brennan. Whitmore's smile did not reach his eyes. He was a tall man, imposing in his black preacher's suit. Silver hair swept back from a face that probably looked kind to those who did not know better. But Cale saw the calculation in those cold blue eyes, the cruelty hidden beneath the veneer of godliness. I thought perhaps we could discuss this situation like civilized men. There's nothing to discuss. Whitmore spread his hands in a gesture that was meant to look conciliatory. Now, I'm sure we can reach an arrangement. The child needs proper care, proper guidance. From a bachelor rancher, Whitmore's voice took on a sympathetic tone that made Cale's skin crawl. Come now, you know as well as I do that a man in your position can't provide what a young girl needs. And what does a young girl need? Reverend Cale stepped forward. To be sold to the highest bidder. To be beaten until she's afraid of her own shadow. Something flickered in Whitmore's eyes, just for a moment. Then the mask slipped back into place. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. The scars on her back say otherwise. Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire pulled too tight. That child came to me, damaged. Whitmore's voice dripped with false concern. Her mother was negligent. Her circumstances dire. We did our best to rehabilitate her, but some damage cannot be undone. Convenient. It's the truth. Whitmore stepped closer, his voice dropping to something more honest, more dangerous. Mr. Brennan, let me be frank. You have no wife, no family, no standing in this community. You've isolated yourself for years. And now you expect people to believe you're suited to raise a child. I don't care what people believe. You should. Whitmore's smile was sharp as a knife. Because in 2 weeks, a judge will decide whether you're fit to keep that girl. And I promise you my testimony will be thorough. Cale stepped forward, close enough to see the slight widening of Whitmore's eyes, the barely perceptible step back. Threaten me all you want, Reverend. Come after me with everything you've got. But know this, Cale's voice dropped to something cold and deadly. If you try to take that little girl, I will burn your whole operation to the ground. Every crooked deal, every missing child, Every cent you've taken from suffering families. Whitmore's face went the color of ash. You wouldn't. Try me. For a long moment, neither man moved. The air between them crackled with violence barely held in check. Then Whitmore stepped back, adjusted his collar with hands that shook just slightly. I see we understand each other. We do. I'll see you at the hearing, Mr. Brennan. He walked away. Cale watched until he disappeared down the road. Until the dust from his horse's hooves settled. Until the rage burning in his chest cooled enough that he trusted himself to move. When he turned around, Emma was standing in the doorway. Was that the bad man? Her whisper was barely audible. Cale crouched down, gathered her into his arms. He's not going to hurt you, sweetheart. Not ever again. But he wants to take me away. He wants to. He won't. Emma pulled back. Her small hands framed his face with a gentleness that broke his heart. You're scared. I can tell. Cale's throat tightened. Don't be. Emma pressed her forehead against his. You're brave. Braver than anyone. What makes you say that? Because you saved me. Her voice was fierce despite its smallness. And people who save people are the bravest of all. Cale held her tighter, blinking against the sting in his eyes. 4 years he had spent building walls, 4 years convinced that caring meant losing, that love meant pain. And now a 3-year-old girl was teaching him that some things were worth the risk. That night, for the first time since Anna died, Cale prayed. Not for himself, for Emma. For the chance to keep the promise he had made to a broken child who had somehow pieced his broken heart back together. 10 days until the hearing. 10 days to build an unbreakable case. 10 days to save his daughter's life. Dr. Catherine Hayes came to the ranch the next morning. She arrived in a buggy driven by her own hand. A rarity for a woman, but then Catherine had never been one to care much about convention. She was in her 40s, handsome rather than pretty, with intelligent eyes and capable hands and a no-nonsense manner that had earned her the respect of every woman in the territory and the suspicion of most men. I heard about your situation, she said without preamble. I want to help. How I've examined children from Whitmore's orphanage before. 3 of them over the past 2 years. Catherine's jaw tightened. 2 had injuries consistent with severe beatings. 1 had marks suggesting other abuse. Cale's stomach turned. Did you report it? I tried. Bitterness crept into Catherine's voice. The sheriff dismissed my concerns, said children lie, that I was misinterpreting innocent accidents. A woman's word against a man of God's. I never stood a chance, but if you testified at the hearing, I would gladly. But I need to examine Emma first, document her injuries properly, create a medical record that even Judge Stone can't ignore. Cale hesitated. Emma had barely gotten comfortable with Sarah touching her, a stranger poking and prodding. She's terrified of being examined. I know. Catherine's expression softened in a way that suggested she understood more than Cale had said. That's why I'm asking your permission first. I won't force her, won't even try if she says no. But if she'll let me, I might be able to give you the evidence you need. Cale found Emma in the barn with Tommy. They were feeding carrots to Buttercup. The filly had grown noticeably in just 2 weeks. Her legs were still too long for her body, her movements still awkward. But she was healthy, strong. Sweetheart, I need to talk to you. Emma looked up instantly, her body language shifting to wary. Am I in trouble? No. No. Cale crouched down to her level. There's a lady here, a doctor. She wants to look at you, make sure you're healthy. Emma's face went white. No, she's very gentle. She won't hurt you. They always say that. Emma backed away, shaking her head. They always say gentle and then they're not. This is different. No. Emma's voice rose to a scream. No doctors, no looking, no. She bolted, disappearing through the barn door before Cale could react. Tommy's eyes were huge. I'll find her. No. Let me. Cale found her 20 minutes later. Huddled in the hayloft with Biscuit pressed against her face. She was shaking so hard he could hear her teeth chattering. He climbed up slowly, making noise so she would know he was coming. Hey. No response. He sat down a few feet away, giving her space. I'm sorry I scared you. That wasn't fair. Still nothing. Can you tell me why you're so afraid of doctors? Silence stretched between them. Then so quietly he almost missed it. They look at the bad parts. What bad parts? The parts that make you dirty. Emma's voice was hollow. The parts that make people not want you. Cale's heart cracked clean in half. Emma, sweetheart, there's nothing dirty about you. Nothing. The other doctor said there was. She finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. At the orphanage. He looked at my back and said I was damaged goods. Said nobody would want a broken thing like me. Rage. Pure white-hot rage flooded through Cale's veins. His hands clenched so hard his nails bit into his palms. That doctor was wrong, dead wrong. You're not broken, Emma. You're not damaged. You're perfect. Then why do they hurt me? The question hung in the air like something poisonous. Cale did not have an answer. There was no answer that could make sense of grown adults beating a 3-year-old child. Because they were evil, he said finally. Because something was wrong with them. Not you. You didn't do anything to deserve what happened. Nothing. Emma studied his face with those 2 old eyes. The lady doctor. Is she nice? I think so. But you don't have to see her if you don't want to. Will it help looking at my bad parts? God, it killed him, that she called them that. It might help us fight the bad man, the one who wants to take you away. Emma considered this for a long moment. Then she stood up, brushed hay from her dress, lifted her chin with a determination that broke Cale's heart. Okay, she can look, but you have to stay. I'll stay as long as you need me. The examination was brutal to watch. Catherine was gentle, truly gentle. But every time she touched Emma, the little girl flinched. Every time she asked Emma to move or turn, Emma's body went rigid with fear. But she did not cry, did not scream, just held Cale's hand in a death grip and stared at the wall. Jesus Christ. Catherine breathed when she saw Emma's back. How old are these? Some are months old, Cale said through gritted teeth. Some are newer. Catherine's hands trembled as she documented each scar, each bruise, each mark that told the story of systematic abuse. There are at least 15 separate incidents here, different stages of healing. Her voice was thick. This wasn't punishment for misbehavior. This was torture. Can you prove it came from the orphanage? I can prove it didn't happen on your ranch. The oldest scars predate your custody by months. Catherine looked at him with fire in her eyes. This child was being beaten regularly, Mr. Brennan, by someone with access to a belt or strap, someone in a position of authority. Whitmore, or someone working for him. Catherine closed her bag. I'll have my report ready for the hearing. And Mr. Brennan, whatever happens, I want you to know you saved this child's life. After Catherine left, Emma sat in Cale's lap, exhausted and trembling. Did I do good? You did so good, sweetheart. So brave. Will it help? I think so. I hope so. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made Cale's breath catch. Papa. She had called him that before, but never so deliberately. Never with such intention. Yeah. If the bad man wins, will you remember me? His arms tightened around her. Nobody's going to win except us. But if they do, her voice was small but steady. If they take me back, will you remember that I was happy here? That I had a papa and a horse and cookies whenever I wanted Emma? I need to know. She looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes. I need to know that somewhere someone remembers that I was happy, even if it was just for a little while. Cale could not speak, could not breathe, could not do anything except hold this tiny child who had learned to prepare for happiness being stolen. I'll remember, he whispered finally, but it won't come to that. I swear to you. 2 days before the hearing, everything changed. A young woman arrived at the ranch, barely 18, thin as a rail, with haunted eyes that reminded Cale sickeningly of Emma when he had first brought her home. Mr. Brennan, she twisted her hands nervously. I'm Sarah Miller. I used to live at Reverend Whitmore's orphanage. Come inside. Her story spilled out in the kitchen, Sarah Morgan pressing tea into her hands while she talked. I was there for 6 years, from when I was 8 until I aged out at 14. Sarah Miller's voice shook but did not stop. The beatings were regular. If you talked back, if you didn't work fast enough, if you looked at him wrong. She took a shaky breath. But that wasn't the worst part. What was the worst part? The ones who got sold. Sarah's face went pale. Pretty girls mostly. Young ones. Families would come. Look us over like livestock. Pay Whitmore and take us away. Adopted number something else. She met Cale's eyes. I had a friend, Mary. She was 7. A couple from Helena paid $50 for her. She went away happy, thinking she was getting a family. What happened, I saw her 2 years later in Helena, working in a— Sarah stopped, swallowed hard. A house, a bad house. She didn't recognize me, or pretended not to. Sarah Morgan made a sound like she had been struck, and Mrs. Price Cale asked quietly. She took 3 girls while I was there, said she needed household help. Sarah Miller's hands tightened around her teacup. None of them ever came back. None of them ever wrote. They just disappeared. Would you testify to this? That's why I'm here. Sarah lifted her chin, a spark of defiance breaking through the fear. I heard what you did at the auction. How you saved that little girl. Nobody ever saved us, Mr. Brennan. Nobody ever even tried. You're brave to come forward. I'm terrified, Sarah admitted. Whitmore has friends everywhere. If he finds out I talked, stay here at the ranch until the hearing's over. I couldn't. You can and you will. Sarah Morgan's voice broke no argument. This house has plenty of room, and nobody threatens a guest under my roof. That night, Cale sat with William Hart until past midnight, piecing together everything they had gathered. Catherine's medical report showing systematic abuse. Sarah Miller's testimony about the trafficking operation. Financial records Will had managed to obtain showing payments from Margaret Price to Whitmore's orphanage. Payments that did not match any official adoption records. It's not airtight, Will admitted. A good lawyer could poke holes. But it's enough to raise doubt, maybe enough to save Emma. Maybe isn't good enough. It's what we have. Cale stared at the papers spread across his desk. What if we lose, then we appeal? File injunctions. Stall. And in the meantime, Emma goes back to that place. Will was quiet for a long moment. There might be another option. I'm listening. If you were married, the court would look at you differently. A stable family unit, a mother figure for Emma. I'm not marrying someone just to win a custody case, I know, but it's worth considering. Will stood, gathering his papers. Get some sleep, Mr. Brennan. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But Cale did not sleep. He sat on Emma's floor, watching her breathe, counting the hours until everything he had built could be taken away. The morning of the hearing dawned hot and merciless. Cale dressed in his best suit, the one he had worn to Anna's funeral. Emma wore a new dress Sarah had made, white with blue flowers, her hair braided neat and clean. Do I look pretty? She spun for him. Prettiest girl in Montana, pretty enough to keep Ben. The question gutted him. Emma, no matter what happens today, you are worth keeping. You understand me. This isn't about whether you're good enough. This is about grown-ups fighting over something that should never have been in question. She nodded slowly. Okay, Papa. They rode into town in silence. Sarah sat with Emma in the wagon bed, holding her hand. Sarah Miller followed on a borrowed horse. Pale but determined. The courthouse was packed. Half the town had turned out. Some curious, some supportive, most just hungry for spectacle. Cale spotted Whitmore immediately, standing near the front in his black preacher suit. Margaret Price beside him in widow's weeds. They both looked supremely confident. That confidence wavered slightly when they saw Sarah Miller. What's she doing here? Margaret hissed. Whitmore's face went carefully blank. Nothing to worry about. The word of a former orphan against a man of God. Nobody will believe her. But his eyes said something different. His eyes said afraid. Judge Abraham Stone called the court to order, and Caleb Brennan's fate began to be decided. Patterson Whitmore's lawyer went first, a slick man from Helena, all smooth words and practiced outrage. This child was removed from proper care without authorization. Mr. Brennan, however well-intentioned, circumvented established procedures designed to protect vulnerable children. Will rose. Objection. The auction at which Mr. Brennan acquired custody has been conducted annually for 15 years without challenge from Reverend Whitmore. Because I trusted that good families would step forward. Whitmore's voice rang with practiced sincerity. I never imagined a single man with no experience would attempt to raise a young girl alone. Reverend Whitmore, you'll have your chance to testify. Judge Stone's voice was stern. Continue, Mr. Patterson. Patterson laid out his case. Cale's isolation, his lack of family, the absence of a proper maternal influence. He painted a picture of a lonely bachelor playing at fatherhood with a child who deserved better. And what does better look like, Will asked during cross-examination. The orphanage where she was beaten. The system that was preparing to sell her to the highest bidder. Objection. Inflammatory, I'll allow it. Stone's eyes were sharp. Answer the question, Reverend. Whitmore's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes turned cold. I have no knowledge of any mistreatment. The orphanage follows all established guidelines for child welfare. Then how do you explain this? Will handed the judge Catherine's medical report. Stone read it. His face went gray. 15 documented instances of beating, scars consistent with whipping, bruises in various stages of healing, all sustained before Mr. Brennan took custody. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Children fall, they play roughly, Patterson interjected. On their backs, with marks that match a belt or strap, Will's voice cut like a blade. These aren't playground injuries, Your Honor. This is systematic abuse. Stone banged his gavel. Order, I will have order. When the room quieted, Stone turned to Whitmore. Reverend, do you have any explanation for these injuries? The child came to us already damaged. Her mother was negligent, her circumstances dire. We did our best to rehabilitate her, but some damage cannot be undone. That's a lie. Every head turned toward the back of the courtroom. Sarah Miller stood, trembling but resolute. That's a lie, and he knows it. Young woman, this is highly irregular. Patterson started. Let her speak. Stone's eyes were sharp. Who are you, Sarah Miller? I spent 6 years in Reverend Whitmore's care. She walked forward, her voice growing stronger with each step. I know what happens in that orphanage. I know about the beatings, the starvation, the children who disappear. Disappear sold to families who don't want children. They want workers, servants. Sarah's gaze locked onto Margaret Price, who had gone deathly pale. Or worse. This is outrageous. Whitmore surged to his feet. This girl is clearly disturbed. I have names. Sarah did not flinch. Mary Collins, sold to a Helena buyer at age 7, last seen working in a brothel. Catherine Moore, taken by Mrs. Price at age 9, never heard from again. Thomas Reed, 8 years old, purchased by a mining company, died in a cave and 6 months later. The courtroom exploded. Stone pounded his gavel until silence returned. His face was like thunder. Reverend Whitmore, Mrs. Price, you will remain in this courthouse when proceedings conclude. Sheriffs see that they don't leave. Whitmore's face had gone the color of ash. Margaret looked like she might faint. Your Honor, Patterson attempted. These are unsubstantiated accusations. Then they can be investigated. In the meantime, we have a custody matter to resolve. Stone turned to Cale. Mr. Brennan, I'd like to hear from you. Cale stood, his legs unsteady beneath him. The weight of every eye in the courtroom pressed down like physical force. He had faced charging bulls, broken horses that could kill with a single kick, winters that froze men solid in their saddles. But this, standing before a judge who held his daughter's fate in his hands, this was a different kind of terror. What would you like to know? Judge Stone leaned forward, his weathering face unreadable. Why did you take this child? The question he had been asked a dozen times. The question he had never fully answered. Not to Jake, not to Sarah, not even to himself in the dark hours before dawn. Cale looked at Emma, sitting between Sarah Morgan and Catherine Hayes, her bear clutched to her chest, her eyes fixed on his face with absolute trust. Trust he had not earned, trust he did not deserve. Trust that terrified him more than any judgment Stone could deliver, because she was standing on that platform and nobody wanted her. His voice came out rough, scraped raw by emotion he could no longer contain. Because I know what it's like to feel that way, to believe you're not worth fighting for. You're a wealthy man, Mr. Brennan, a respected rancher. Surely you've never. My wife died 4 years ago. The words tore out of him. My son, 3 days later. Silence fell over the courtroom. Even Patterson had the grace to look uncomfortable. I spent 4 years convinced that caring about anyone was a death sentence, that it was safer to be alone. Cale paused, gathering himself, forcing the words past the lump in his throat. Then I saw Emma. Saw her standing there with nothing but a broken toy and broken faith, waiting for someone to tell her she mattered. And I couldn't walk away. I couldn't let her believe the lie that she wasn't worth saving. And are you equipped to raise her a single man with no experience? No. The honesty surprised everyone, including Cale himself. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I mess up constantly. He looked at Emma. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. But I love her, and I will spend every day of my life trying to be what she needs. Papa, Emma's small voice cut through the courtroom like a bell. She had slipped away from Sarah, was standing in the aisle, tears streaming down her face. Papa, I want to say something. Child, this is a courtroom, Stone started. Please, Emma's voice broke. Please let me talk. The judge studied her for a long moment. This tiny girl with enormous eyes. This child who had suffered more in 3 years than most people suffered in a lifetime. Then he nodded. Emma walked forward. So small among all these adults, so fragile looking. But her voice was steady when she spoke. The bad man says I need a proper family. A mama and a papa and a nice house. She looked at Whitmore, and something fierce flashed in her eyes. But I had those things at his orphanage. I had a bed and food sometimes and other kids, and they still hurt me. She turned to the judge. Papa Cale never hurts me. He reads me stories. He lets me name the baby horses. He stays with me when I have bad dreams, even when he's tired. Her small hands clenched at her sides. He chose me when nobody else would, and I choose him back. The silence that followed was absolute. That's quite a statement, young lady. Stone cleared his throat. I mean it. Emma's chin lifted. If you send me back to the bad man, I'll run away. I'll run and run until I find Papa again. Because he's my family now, and nobody gets to take that away. She walked back to Cale, wrapped her arms around his leg, held on like she would never let go. Stone was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. In 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such courage from one so young. He looked at Whitmore, then at Margaret, then at Cale and Emma, and rarely seen such darkness masquerading as righteousness. He picked up his gavel. It is the ruling of this court that Emma Rose remains in the custody of Caleb Brennan, effective immediately and permanently. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into the operations of the Silver Creek Orphanage and the activities of Reverend Silas Whitmore and Mrs. Margaret Price. The gavel came down like thunder. Court is adjourned. Chaos erupted. People shouted, crowded, rushed forward. Whitmore tried to flee and was stopped by the sheriff. Margaret collapsed into her seat sobbing, but Cale heard none of it. He dropped to his knees, gathered Emma into his arms, holding her so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his own. We won, she whispered. We really won. We really won, sweetheart. I get to stay forever. She pulled back, her face wet with tears, but split by a smile so bright it could have lit up the whole courthouse. I told you. I told you we were brave, Cale laughed, a real laugh, the first one in years, pressed his forehead against hers. Yeah, little one, we really are. Around them, the world continued its chaos, justice being served, villains being led away, a community reckoning with horrors it had ignored for too long. But in that moment, none of it mattered. A father had fought for his daughter, a daughter had found her voice, and a family forged not from blood, but from choice had won the right to exist. The days after the hearing felt like waking from a long nightmare. Whitmore was arrested before he could leave the courthouse. Margaret Price followed within the hour. The sheriff, facing his own investigation, suddenly became very cooperative, producing records he had claimed did not exist, revealing connections that ran deeper than anyone had suspected. 7 children were recovered from Margaret's household, all of them malnourished, all of them bearing scars similar to Emma's. The youngest was 4. The oldest was 12 and could not remember ever being called by her real name. Silver Creek would never be the same. But Cale barely noticed the town's reckoning. His entire world had narrowed to the small girl who now ran through his house without flinching, who laughed at Tommy's jokes, who fell asleep without checking the door 3 times. Papa, watch. Emma stood on the corral fence, arms spread wide for balance. 2 months ago, she would have been too terrified to climb anything. Now she was fearless. Careful, sweetheart. I am careful. See, I didn't fall. Not yet. Not ever. She jumped down into his arms with complete confidence that he would catch her, because he always did. Buttercup's getting big. Tommy says she'll be ready to ride soon. Kale carried her toward the barn. Tommy talks too much. Tommy's my best friend. After you and Sarah and Biscuit, I'm honored to be in such distinguished company. She giggled. The sound still made Kale's chest ache with gratitude. Papa, yeah, do you think Mama can see me from heaven? The question caught him off guard. Emma rarely talked about her mother. Annie, a laundress who had worked herself to death trying to keep her daughter fed. I think she can, Kale said carefully. I think she's real proud of you, even though I live with you now, even though I call you Papa, especially because of that. Kale sat her down on a hay bale. She immediately climbed into his lap, bringing the smell of horse and hay with her. Your mama wanted you to be happy, Emma, safe, loved. That's all any good parent wants. Emma considered this seriously. Do you think she sent you to the auction? Martha says sometimes angels send people to help us when we can't help ourselves. Maybe Mama sent you to be my new papa because she couldn't be here anymore. Kale's throat closed up. He had spent 4 years thinking Anna's death meant God had abandoned him. That faith was foolishness. That hoping for anything good was a recipe for heartbreak. But looking at Emma now, healthy and happy, and trusting him with everything she had, he wondered if maybe he had been wrong. Maybe she did. In early August, Dr. Catherine Hayes brought news. The investigation into Whitmore was expanding. They had found records going back 15 years, hundreds of children sold, dozens unaccounted for, and the ones they can find, Kale asked, being returned to family when possible, placed with proper adoptive families when not. Catherine's expression was grim. But many of them, Kale. What these children endured, the scars won't heal overnight. I know, some may never heal at all, but they can get better, with time, with love. The ones who find what Emma found, someone willing to fight for them. Catherine paused. That's actually why I'm here, beyond the investigation news. There's a boy, Daniel. He's 7, been in the system since he was 3. No one wants him because he's difficult, angry, been returned twice by families who couldn't handle him. Kale was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the empty rooms in his house, the abundance he had accumulated without anyone to share it, the years he had spent thinking he was not capable of love. I'd have to talk to Emma first. Catherine's face lit up. You're considering it? I'm not saying no. He found Emma in the barn, brushing Buttercup with the careful attention she gave everything she loved. Can I ask you something, sweetheart? Sure, Papa. He sat down on a hay bale. She immediately climbed into his lap, bringing the smell of horse and hay with her. How would you feel about having a brother? Emma went very still. A brother? There's a boy, Daniel. He's 7. He doesn't have a family, and he's had a really hard time, kind of like you did. Is he sad? I think so, and angry and scared. Emma considered this seriously. Did people hurt him too? Yes. Does he have nightmares? Probably. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made Kale's heart swell. I was really scared when you brought me home. Everything was new and strange, and I kept waiting for you to be mean like everyone else. I remember. But you weren't mean. You were patient. You let me be scared until I wasn't anymore. She looked up at him with those serious brown eyes. Maybe Daniel needs someone to be patient with him too. Maybe he does, and maybe he could be my brother. And I could show him how the nightmares get smaller when you have people who love you. Kale's arms tightened around her. You'd be okay with that, sharing me. You have lots of love, Papa. Emma said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Enough for lots of people. Sarah says love doesn't run out. It just grows bigger. Sarah's right. Sarah's always right. Emma grinned. So can Daniel come live with us? Let's meet him first. Make sure we're all a good fit. Okay. But I think it'll work out. She wrapped her arms around his neck. I think maybe God sent Daniel to us, like he sent you to me. The meeting with Daniel was scheduled for the following week. Kale spent the days before wrestling with doubt. Was he ready for another child? Could he handle a boy with anger issues with trauma deeper and more complex than Emma's? Was he being foolish, reaching for more than he could hold? But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Emma's words. Love doesn't run out, it just grows bigger. And he remembered himself 4 years ago, building walls, convincing himself that isolation was safety. How wrong he had been. How empty that life had felt. Some things were worth the risk. The day before they were supposed to meet Daniel, Emma came to Kel with a gift. I made this. She held out a small object wrapped in cloth for Daniel, for when he comes. Kel unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a wooden horse, crudely carved but recognizable, painted with what looked like berry juice. I asked Jake to help me. It's not very good, but when I came here, biscuit was all I had, and Daniel doesn't have anything. So I thought maybe he could have a horse, like Buttercup, something that's just his. Kale could not speak, could not do anything but pull his daughter into his arms and hold her tight. It's perfect, he managed finally. He's going to love it. You think so? I know so. Emma beamed. I want him to feel like he belongs, like someone wanted to give him something special. You're going to be the best big sister. You know that, I know. She giggled. That's why I practiced on Tommy first. Meeting Daniel was similar to Emma's first days. He was 7, but small for his age. Dark hair that needed cutting. Clothes that were clean but worn. And eyes that held the same haunted look Emma's had carried. Walls so high they seemed insurmountable. But Emma helped bridge the gap. She showed him Buttercup, let him hold Biscuit, talked about the nightmares getting smaller, about how Papa never got mad when you were scared. The first months with Daniel were hard. He did not trust anyone, did not believe kindness could exist without ulterior motive, flinched at sudden movements, hoarded food under his mattress, slept with his boots on in case he needed to run. But Cale did not give up. Neither did Emma. The breakthrough came in November. A cold snap hit the territory. Cale found Daniel shivering in the barn at 3 in the morning, barefoot in his nightshirt. Daniel, Cale kept his voice soft. What are you doing out here? The boy pressed himself against the wall, eyes wide with terror. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I'll be good. Didn't mean to when I wet the bed. Daniel's voice cracked with shame. I tried not to. I really tried, but I had a nightmare and when I woke up. Hey, Cale stepped closer slowly. It's okay. It's not okay. Daniel's whole body shook. They punish you when you wet the bed. I know the rules. What rules? No food for a day. Or the dark closet. Or, he choked on the words, or the belt. Cale's heart shattered. Daniel, listened to me. There is no punishment for wetting the bed. Not here. Not ever. But I ruined sheets wash. Bodies clean up. There's nothing you could do that would make me hurt you. You're lying. I'm not. Everyone lies. I don't. Cale stayed crouched, stayed calm. I know you don't believe me. I know you've got no reason to. But I'm telling you the truth. And one day you're going to believe it. Daniel stared at him, shaking with cold and fear. Why? He whispered finally. Why would you want me? I'm bad. I ruin things. Everyone says so. Everyone is wrong. Cale held out his hand. You're not bad, Daniel. You're hurt. There's a difference. What if I can't get better? Then we'll figure it out together. But I'm not giving up on you. Not today. Not ever. Daniel looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then slowly, so slowly, he reached out and took it. Cale led him back to the house, where Sarah was already heating water for a bath, where Emma was stripping the soiled sheets without being asked. I'll make hot chocolate, Emma announced. That's what Papa makes me when I have nightmares. With extra sugar, Daniel's voice was tiny, with extra everything. That night, Daniel slept in Cale's bed, on the opposite side from Emma, who had refused to leave. The three of them fit awkwardly, legs tangled, elbows jabbing. It was the best night's sleep Cale had gotten in months. Winter settled over the ranch like a blanket. Daniel began to thaw along with the frozen ground. He started talking more, first to Emma, then to Tommy, then finally to Sarah and Cale. He discovered he loved horses almost as much as Emma did. Turned out to have a talent for wood carving that left even Jake impressed. He made this. Emma showed Cale a small carved bird, delicate and detailed. For me, because I told him I liked the Blue Jays. That's beautiful. He's really good at making things. Emma paused. I think because he's had a lot of practice at building walls, but now he's learning to build other stuff instead. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just finally noticing. Christmas came with all its attendant chaos. Cale had never celebrated the holiday properly, not since Anna died. But this year, Sarah insisted, and Emma and Daniel were beside themselves with excitement. "We've never had a real Christmas," Daniel confided to Cale on Christmas Eve. "At the orphanage, they just gave us extra porridge." "Well, this is going to be better than extra porridge." Promise. The word still cost Daniel something to say, still felt like a risk. Promise. Christmas morning was everything Cale had hoped. The children woke at dawn, barely able to contain themselves. They tore into presents with delighted shrieks. New clothes, books, toys. Emma got a saddle size just for her. Daniel got a complete set of carving tools. But the best gift came last. "I have something else," Cale said when the wrapping paper settled. "For both of you." He handed each of them an envelope. Emma opened hers first. Read it. Read it again. Looked up with tears streaming down her face. "Papa, official adoption papers." Cale's voice was thick. "Signed by Judge Stone himself. You're not just Emma Brennan because we say so anymore. You're Emma Brennan legally. Forever." She launched herself at him, sobbing. Daniel opened his envelope more slowly. His hands were shaking. "This says," he stopped, swallowed. "This says you're adopting me." Pause. "But I've only been here a few months. Doesn't matter how long, matters how much." Cale held out his arm. "Making room. You're my son, Daniel. Have been since the moment you took my hand in that barn. This just makes it official." Daniel stared at him. For a terrifying second, Cale thought he had miscalculated. Then Daniel threw himself forward, crashing into Cale's chest. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you," he sobbed. Cale held both children, his children, legally and forever, and felt something he had not felt in years. Complete. The years that followed were full of exactly that. Emma grew into a fierce young woman who fought for children the way Cale had fought for her. At 18, she enrolled in the first women's law program in the territory, determined to become the kind of advocate that William Hart had been. "I want to be the person who saves them." She told Cale before she left, "The way you saved me, you already are, sweetheart. You always have been." Daniel found his calling too, not in law but in building. He became an architect, designing homes and schools and eventually orphanages that were nothing like the places he had escaped. Every child deserves a beautiful space, he told reporters at the opening of his first children's home, a place that tells them they're worth something, that someone cared enough to build something good for them. And Cale watched his children change the world one life at a time. On Emma's wedding day 20 years after that summer auction, Cale walked her down the aisle of the same church where Whitmore had once preached his false gospel. Nervous, terrified, she admitted, but the good kind, like riding Buttercup fast, like standing up in court for the first time, like trusting someone with your heart. "Yeah," she squeezed his arm, "exactly like that. You taught me that you know how to trust again, how to love without being afraid of losing. You taught me first." She looked up at him with those brown eyes that had captivated him from the moment he had seen them. No longer haunted, but bright with joy. "No," her voice was soft. "You taught me I was worth fighting for. You were always worth it, Emma, from the very first moment." "I know," she smiled. "I finally believe it." The ceremony was beautiful. Daniel gave the toast, Sarah cried, and when Emma danced with her new husband, Cale felt Anna's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. "You did good," he imagined her saying. "Better than good." That night, after the guests had gone and the music had faded, Cale found himself on the porch of the ranch house. The same porch where he had held a terrified 3-year-old and promised her safety. The same porch where he had watched Daniel learn to trust. The same porch where his family had grown from one broken man into something beautiful beyond imagining. Thinking about the old days, Daniel settled into the chair beside him. A man now, strong and sure, thinking about how far we've come. Long way from that auction platform. Longest journey of my life. Cale paused. And the best. Do you ever regret it, taking on all of us? Not for a single second. I'm going to have a child soon. Daniel's voice was quiet. Sarah's pregnant. We just found out. Joy exploded in Cale's chest. Daniel, that's wonderful. I'm terrified, his son admitted. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough? You'll mess up sometimes. Everyone does. But you'll also love them with everything you have. And that's what matters. How do you know? Because I know you. Cale reached over, gripped Daniel's shoulder. Because I've watched you grow from a boy who trusted no one into a man who loves with his whole heart. You're going to be an incredible father, Daniel. I have no doubt. Because you taught me how. Because you chose to learn. There's a difference. Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her wedding dress. There you two are. I should have known. She crossed the porch, settled onto the arm of Cale's chair. Hiding from the party. The party's over, Daniel pointed out. Then hiding from the cleanup. That too. Emma laughed, leaning her head against Cale's shoulder. Daniel told you his news? He did. I'm going to be a grandfather. She sounded dazed. Happy. A real grandfather with a real grandchild. We're going to be a family, Daniel corrected. A real family. We've always been a real family, Cale said quietly. From the moment I stepped onto that platform. Everything else has just been confirmation. They sat together as the stars emerged. Three people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives and built something lasting. Something true. Papa Emma's voice was soft. Yeah, thank you for everything. For seeing me when nobody else would. For fighting when you could have walked away. For being the father I never knew I needed. Thank you for letting me. Cale kissed the top of her head. For taking the chance on a broken man who didn't know the first thing about raising children. You learned fast. I had good teachers. Daniel stood, stretched, offered a hand to help Emma up. We should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. Long life tomorrow, Emma corrected. And the day after, and the day after that. Good. Daniel grinned. I'm planning to need every single one of them. They went inside, leaving Cale alone on the porch. He stayed there for a long time, watching the stars, thinking about all the roads that had led to this moment. The grief, the isolation, the decision that had seemed crazy at the time, but had turned out to be the sanest thing he had ever done. Anna would have loved them, would have loved all of this. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl call called. The horses shifted in the barn. The wind carried the scent of summer grass and distant rain. And Caleb Brennan, who had once believed himself incapable of love, smiled. He had a daughter who fought for justice, a son who built beautiful things, a grandchild on the way, a legacy of love that would outlast him by generations. Not bad for a man who had gone to town for a horse and come home with a family. Not bad at all. 25 years after that summer day at the auction, Cale passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his children, his grandchildren, and enough love to fill every empty room in the house that had once echoed with loneliness. His last words were to Emma, who held his hand as the sun rose over the mountains he had loved his whole life. You were worth it, he whispered. Every fight, every fear, every moment, you were worth all of it. I know, Papa. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. You taught me that. Then I did my job right. He closed his eyes. And Emma, the little girl, nobody wanted the child who had been thrown away and forgotten, held her father's hand, and said goodbye to the man who had looked at her on that platform and decided she was worth everything. At his funeral, the entire territory came to pay respects. Former orphans he had helped rescue, families he had supported, children whose lives had been changed by the ripple effects of his single act of courage. Emma spoke last. My father was not a complicated man, she said, looking out at the crowd. He believed in hard work, in keeping your word, in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. But the thing that made him extraordinary wasn't any of that. She paused, gathering herself. The thing that made him extraordinary was his capacity to love, to see a broken child and believe she could be whole, to take a chance on hearts that had been shattered and trust that they could heal. She looked at Daniel, standing with his wife and their 3 children. At Sarah, gray-haired now but still fierce. At Tommy, who had become her husband, completing a circle that had begun in a hayloft decades ago. He taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up day after day, improving through action what words can never fully express. Her voice steadied. My father saved my life when I was 3 years old. But more than that, he gave me a life worth living. He gave me love worth believing in. He gave me a future I never dreamed was possible. She lifted her chin, that familiar gesture of determination that Cale had recognized the very first time he had seen it. And I will spend the rest of my days making sure that legacy continues. That every child who feels unwanted knows there's someone fighting for them. That every broken heart learns it can beat again. She placed her hand on his casket. That's what you taught me, Papa. That's what I'll teach them. The service ended. The crowds dispersed. But the family remained. Emma, Daniel, Tommy, Sarah. The children running between gravestones. Too young to understand loss, but old enough to feel love. They stood together at Cale's grave, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. He would have hated all this fuss. Daniel said finally, he would have loved every second of it. Emma corrected. He just would have pretended to hate it. Same thing. She laughed through her tears. Yeah, same thing. A breeze stirred the grass. Somewhere a horse whinnied, and in that moment Emma felt her father's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. I'm proud of you. She closed her eyes. I know, Papa. I finally know. The Brennan Ranch stands to this day. Emma's great-grandchildren run through its fields, play in its barns, ride horses descended from Buttercup. And in the main house above the fireplace hangs a portrait. A man, two children, a woman who refused to be left out. Not posed stiffly like most family portraits of the era, but candid, natural. The man is laughing at something the girl has said. The boy is leaning against his shoulder. The woman is rolling her eyes at all of them with fond exasperation. Below the portrait on a small brass plaque are the words Emma chose. Family is not born, family is built, and love once given never dies. That is the legacy of Caleb Brennan. Not the ranch, not the horses, not the reforms he helped pass or the children he helped save, but the simple truth he discovered on a summer day, standing on an auction platform, looking at a child nobody wanted. That some things are worth fighting for. That some people are worth believing in. That love in all its terrifying glory is the only thing that makes any of it worthwhile. He found a daughter when he went looking for a horse. He found a son when he thought his heart was full. He found a family when he believed himself incapable of love. And in finding them, he found himself. That is the power of choice. That is the miracle of belonging. That is what it means to love completely and without reservation, forever and always.